In this Blender tutorial, I will show you how to create this procedural lava planet in Blender. And I'm also going to show you how to make an atmosphere which adapts to the lighting. So I have this sunlight here in the 3D scene, and as you can see, whenever I rotate the sunlight is always going to be pointed at the planet. And then we will also be adding this procedural atmosphere to the material, and we're going to set it up so that whenever we move the sunlight, the atmosphere is going to change. And so this way you can only see the atmosphere where the sun is actually shining on the planet. And if you'd like to purchase the tutorial files, then you can do that over on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. I'll have the links in the description. And purchasing the project files is also a great way to help support me and this channel. And if you'd like to purchase more of my procedural materials, then you can also check out my Blender procedural material packs. And if you'd like to learn how to create any of my procedural materials, then you can also check out my Blender procedural material tutorial playlist on YouTube. All the links are in the description. So before we create the procedural material, let's set up the 3D scene. So I'm going to start by pressing Shift A, and I'm going to go right here to Mesh, and I'm going to add a plane. And we're going to be adding this plane in the background, and then we're going to add a procedural star texture to it. So I'm going to press G to grab. Let's bring this over on the Y-axis, and then I want to rotate it on the X-axis, and then I'm going to type in 90 for 90 degrees and enter. So now we've rotated this over by 90 degrees, and I can just scale this up. And then I also added a camera. I pressed Shift A, and I went right here and added a camera, and then I just brought the camera back and pointed it into the center of the 3D scene. And if you have the camera selected, you can click right over here on the object data properties, and I turned the focal length up to 60, and that way things are going to be a little bit more flat, and I think it does look better when rendering a large planet. And then also, while we're right over here in these settings, I'm also going to go right over here to the render properties, and I'm going to go down here and open up the color management. And I'm going to set the view transform to filmic, and then I'm going to set the look here to very high contrast. And so this is going to make the lighting more contrasty, and it's also going to make the colors more saturated. And then one more thing that I did to the scene settings, I went right over here to the world properties, and I just deleted the world. And I deleted the world because I don't want there to be like a gray background or anything. I don't want there to be any light coming from the world because this planet is in space, so it's going to be very black. So now we need to add an object for the planet. So I'm going to press Shift S, and then I'm going to move my mouse over to the cursor to world origin. This is going to make sure the 3D cursor is in the very center. That way I can now press Shift A, and I'm going to go right here to Mesh, and I'm going to add an icosphere. And the new object is going to be added wherever the 3D cursor is. Now don't click away from the icosphere and don't move it around. Right behind me, you can click on this little Add Icosphere setting. Now on the subdivisions here, I'm going to click on the arrow here to turn up the subdivisions because I want it to be nice and round and smooth. So I'm going to turn these subdivisions up to a 6. That is pretty high detail, but I want this to be a nice smooth planet. And then using the object context menu, I'm just going to shade this object smooth. Now we also need to add the sunlight, so let's do that. So I'm going to press Shift A, and let's go right down here to light, and I'm going to add the sunlight. And then I'm going to press G to grab, and I'm going to move the sunlight right up here. And then I can also press R to rotate. We're just going to rotate that over so it's kind of pointed at the planet. Now with the sun selected, you can click right over here to the object data properties. And I'm going to set the sun strength to a value of 6. And I'm going to also hold down the Z button and move my mouse up into the rendered view so that I can actually preview how the lighting is looking. And then also, because this is supposed to be sunlight from a sun in the solar system, I just want to take the color here and I want to make this very slightly yellow because the sunlight would be just a little bit yellow. So I'm just going to make that a very slight yellow color. Now when I move the sunlight around, I always want it to rotate towards the planet. So to do this, just make sure you have the light selected, and then you can click right over here on the object constraint properties. And I'm going to click on add object constraint, and then I'm going to add the track to. So then right here on the target, you can click on the drop down and you can add the icosphere, or you can also click on the little eyedropper and then click on the icosphere. So now if I move the sun around, it's always going to be pointed at the planet. Now when we create the procedural material, I only want to preview the atmosphere where the sun is shining on the planet. So to do this, I need to create a gradient within the shader nodes, and then when the sun moves, I need the gradient to also move. And the gradient is going to tell the material where to show the atmosphere. So to do this, just press Shift S again and make sure you go to the cursor to world origin so the 3D cursor is in the center there. So I can now press Shift A, and I'm going to go here to empty, and I'm just going to add a plane axis. And then I want to be able to preview this, so I'm going to press press S to scale, and I'm just going to scale this up so it's a bit bigger than the planet so I can see it. Now, if for some reason I want to move the planet around, I want the empty to follow with it, because the empty is going to control where the gradient is. So I'm going to select the empty, and then I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select the icosphere. I can now press Control P, and then I'm going to set parent to object. And because we selected the sphere last, the sphere is going to be the parent object, and then the empty is going to be the child object. So now when I move the planet, the empty is moving along with it. So as I said, when the sun moves, I want the gradient to move, and the gradient is going to be created by the rotation of the empty. So I want the empty to always be rotated towards the sun. So to do this, you can just select the empty and then go to the object constraint properties, and I'm going to click on add object constraint, and I can add the track to. And then you can click on the target and you can add the sun, or you can also use the eyedropper and then just select the sun object. So if I go back into the solid view, you can see this better. So now when I move the sun around, the empty is always following the sun. So we can then use the rotation of the empty to create the gradient. So I'm going to go back into the rendered view here in the 3D space, and then also I have the shader editor right here. So I'm going to select the planet object now, and then I'm going to click on new to add a new material, and I can just rename the material. And then I will also be using the Node Wrangler add-on in this tutorial. So if you don't have the Node Wrangler enabled, you can click on edit and you can go to the preferences, and then over there in the add-ons tab, you can search for Node Wrangler and just checkmark the Node Wrangler add-on. And I'll show you how to use it in the video. So now we can create the gradient, which is going to control where the atmosphere is. So I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the texture coordinate node, and I'm going to stick the texture coordinate over here. And then to use the Node Wrangler add-on, I can hold down the Control and Shift key, and then I can select different nodes. So hold down the Control and Shift key and click on different nodes, and that is going to preview the node on the object. And I want to Control Shift and click on the texture coordinate, and I'm going to continue to click on it until we go down to the object coordinates. So the object coordinates is going to have an X, Y, and Z values. And these colors here are representing the X, Y, and Z values. But I want to create a gradient, so I want to break up the X, Y, and Z values and then just use one of them. So to do this, I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to go here to the search, and I'm going to start to type in separate. And I want to click on the separate X, Y, Z. And then we're going to stick this right here in the wire. So now I can Control Shift and click on the separate X, Y, and Z. And you can see we now have an X axis, a Y axis, and a Z axis. And it is creating a gradient for us. So we have black, and then there's a fade, and then it is white. And I do want to use the Z values, so just make sure you Control Shift and select the separate X, Y, Z till you can preview the Z value. Now this gradient is just pointed up and down, and the gradient isn't moving when I rotate the sun. So I'm going to click back here on the planet, and I am going to use an object in the texture coordinate. So I'm going to click here on the object, and then I'm going to select the empty. Or you can also click right here on the eyedropper to make sure you select the right one, and you can click on the empty object. So now that I've selected the empty here in the texture coordinate, when the empty moves, the gradient will also move. And when the sun moves, it's also going to move the empty. So now when I move the sun, you can see that the gradient is moving. Now if I zoom into the gradient, you can see it is kind of gray and it's not very sharp. So I want to make it more contrasty. So to do this, I can press Shift A. Let's go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the color ramp node, and we're going to stick this color ramp node here in the wire. So I can now play around with these values, and that's going to control the colors. So I'm going to click on the white tab, and I can drag this closer and closer, and you can see as I drag this closer, the gradient is going to be much sharper. And also, just so that the preview is a bit nicer, for now I'm going to click on the plane, and I'm just going to press H to hide it so we can't see the plane in the background. And we will unhide that later and add the stars, but I'm just going to click back here on the sphere. Now I want the atmosphere to be stronger on the edges of the planet. So to do this, I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the layer weight node. And I'm going to put the layer weight node right down here underneath the texture coordinate. Now if I Control Shift and select the layer weight, you can see we have the Fresnel and the facing. And I can continue to Control Shift and click on the layer weight, and that's going to go between the Fresnel and the facing. Now I want to preview the facing because the facing is going to work better for the atmosphere. And then if you change the blend value, that is going to make that darker circle bigger, and so you can't see as much of the white. So I'm going to turn the blend value to a 0.1, and that way it's darker there in the center. So I now want to mix the layer weight with this color ramp. So I'm going to select the layer weight. I can hold down the shift key and then select the color ramp. Now to mix them both together, I can press Ctrl 0, and that is using one of the features of the Node Wrangler add-on. And by pressing Ctrl 0, it's going to add this Mix RGB node, and I can click on this to open it up. And let's actually click and drag and select all of these nodes here. You can also press B for the box select and drag over these nodes and kind of bring them back so we have a bit more space. So I want to preview the Mix RGB, so I can Control Shift and select the Mix RGB to preview it. Now I want the color ramp to be going into the factor, so I'm going to put the wire into the factor. And then I want the facing from the layer weight to go into color 1. So I can actually just unplug the wire. I'm going to take the facing value and I'm going to put that into color 1. And then on the mix option, I'm going to change this to darken because I just want to add the dark values. So I'm now going to click on color 2 and I'm going to make this fully black. And so now that I've made that fully black, you can see the back of the planet doesn't have any of the light values. So where the values are lighter, you're going to be able to see the atmosphere better. Now I do want to control these colors a little bit better because this is actually going to be too bright of an atmosphere. So I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to go here to the search and I'm going to search for the color ramp node, and we're going to stick the color ramp right here in this wire from the layer weight to the darken. And then I'm going to click on the black tab and I'm going to drag it over a little bit so that there's a little bit more of those dark values. And then I'm going to click on this white tab and I'm going to click on this, and just for now I'm going to make it a little bit of a darker gray. And we will change these colors a little bit later when we can actually see what the atmosphere is looking like. So all of these nodes here are used to create the atmosphere. So I'm going to press B for the box select. I'm just going to box select all these nodes, and then I'm going to press Ctrl J. Ctrl J is going to join them together into a frame, and I'm just doing this to organize my nodes better, but you don't have to do this if you don't want to. And then with the frame selected, I can press F2, and that is going to give the frame a label, and I'm going to rename this to atmosphere. So this is just a really nice way to organize the nodes. So this principled shader that we have on default, this is going to be the planet material, but I want the atmosphere to be glowing, so we are going to add a different shader. We're going to add an emission shader, and then we're going to mix the principled shader and the emission shader together. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go here to the search, and I'm going to start to search for emission, and let's add the emission shader, and I'm going to stick the emission shader right here in the atmosphere frame. And then I'm going to Control Shift and select the atmosphere to preview it. So right here on the color, this is going to be the atmosphere color. So I'm going to click on the white tab, and I'm going to make this a strong orange color. And if you'd like to use the same exact color that I'm using, then you can go over here to the hex value and you can punch in FF6900. So that is the color that I'll be using for the atmosphere, and I'm picking an orange color because this is like a hot red lava planet, so I think it looks really cool to have an orange atmosphere. But you could of course create whatever atmospheric color you want right here in this color value. And then here on the strength value, I do want to make this pretty bright, so I'm going to turn the strength value up to like a 20. And you can see that it looks very yellow and bright, and it looks a bit blown out, but this will look very nice once we have it all set up. And I also want the strength value to be very strong so that when we add the glare node in the compositor, the atmosphere is going to have a little bit of a glow. So I do want it to be pretty bright, so I'm going to use a strength value of 20. All right, so we now have this emission here, and then we have the principled shader, and the principled shader is going to be the planet. So I want to mix these two together. So I'm going to select the emission, and then I can hold down the shift key and select the principled shader. I'm now going to press Ctrl 0, and that is going to add a mix shader. So this way we can mix multiple shaders together. So we have the planet, and then we have the atmosphere. Now we have this factor value right here, and if I change this, it's going to be only the planet or only the atmosphere. But I don't want a single value. I want some parts to be the atmosphere, but most parts to be the planet. So instead of using the factor value, we are going to use the darken here, and we're going to pull out a wire from the color, and we're going to stick this into the factor. And then I actually want to flip these two shader values because right now it is mostly the emission, but I'm going to pull out the wire and stick this into the bottom one, and then this principled shader is going to go into the top one. So now you can see that most of the shader is the planet. It is this principled shader, and I can actually just like change the color to maybe like a brown color so you can see it better. And then there is the little spots there on the edge, which is the atmosphere. And so why this is working is because of this darken. So if the values are black, then it's telling it to use the principled shader, but then as the the values get lighter, it's going to tell it to use the emission shader. Now you can see that the atmosphere actually looks a little bit weird. Right here in the center, you're not able to see the atmosphere at all, and then it is very strong here on the sides. So this is where this color ramp comes in. So we can change the colors of this color ramp, and that will change how much of the atmosphere we can see. So I'm first going to click on this gray tab right here, and this color ramp is the one going from the layer weight. So on this bottom color ramp here, I'm going to click on the gray tab, and I'm going to make this darker. And you can see as I make it darker and darker, it's going to get rid of more of the atmosphere. And if you'd like to use the same exact color that I'm using, then right over here on the hex, you can punch in 575757. And then I do want to be able to see just a tiny bit of the atmosphere all over. So if I click on the black tab, I can click on the color, and I can just turn this up a little bit, and now you can see that there's going to be atmosphere all over that side of the planet. But I do want it to be very, very dark because I don't want to be able to see very much of it, just a little bit of it over the surface. And the hex value that I'll be using for this very dark color is going to be 0C, 0C, 0C. So that is the atmosphere. So we can now create the actual procedural planet. So I'm going to navigate right down here to the principled shader, and we're going to start creating the procedural planet. So to start off, we are going to create a texture for the planet's surface. So to do this, I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the noise texture, and let's drop the noise texture right here. And then with the noise texture selected, I can press Control T, and that's going to add the texture coordinate in the mapping. And then I don't need the mapping, so I can just click on it and press X to delete it. And then I want to use the object coordinates, so I'm going to pull out a wire from the object, and I'm going to put that into the vector. And by using the object coordinates, it's going to place the texture on the objects more evenly. And then to preview the noise texture, I can Control Shift and select the noise texture to preview it. So now let's change some of the noise texture settings. So I'm going to turn the scale to like a 4, and then I do want more detail, but not a ton of detail. So I'm going to turn the detail to a 4 as well. And then I do want lots of roughness, so I'm going to turn the roughness all the way up to a value of 1. And now you can see there's lots of little detail because we turned that roughness up. Now I do also want to add some distortion, but instead of just changing this value, I want to put a different texture into the distortion value. So I'm going to press Shift A, let's go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the Musgrave texture, and we're going to stick the Musgrave texture down here. And then just like all the other textures, I want to put the object coordinates into the vector of the Musgrave. And then I can Control Shift and select the Musgrave texture to preview it. So now let's change some of the settings of the Musgrave texture. So I'm going to turn the scale to like a 3.38. I think a 3.38 is pretty good for the scale. And then I want this to be very detailed, so I'm going to turn the detail all the way to the max, which is 15. And now you can see there's a lot more detail on the edges. And then I do want to turn the dimension down, because if I turn the dimension down, there's going to be lots more noise. So I'm going to turn the dimension down to a 0.79. So a 0.79. And then I'll just leave the last value at the default, which is 2. So I now want to take the height value and I want to put that into the distortion. So let me just Control Shift and select the noise texture, and then I can put the height value into the distortion. And so this way, this texture is actually controlling where it's going to be distorted. And you can see that is giving us a really cool effect. And then I also want to add another very detailed noise texture just to give a bunch of detail all over the planet's surface. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go here to the search, and I'm just going to add another noise texture, and we're going to stick this up here. And then again, just like all of the textures, we're going to put the object into the vector. And then I'm going to Control Shift and select the noise texture to preview it. So let's turn the scale up. So I'm going to turn the scale up to like an 8. And then I want this to be very detailed, so we're going to turn the detail level all the way to the max, which is 15. And then let's also turn the roughness up a bit, so I'm going to turn it up to like a 0.7, so there's even more detail. And then also I do want a little bit of distortion, so I'm going to turn that up to like a 0.1. And this is going to add lots of noise to the planet's surface. So I now want to mix these two noise textures together. So I'm going to select the first noise texture, hold down the Shift key, and select the second noise texture. So I can now press Control 0, and Control 0 is going to add the mix RGB, so I can click on the arrow to open it up. Now I just want to add the dark values. So I'm going to click on the mix here, and I'm going to change this to darken. So now if I turn up the factor value, you can see it's just adding those dark values from this noise texture. If I zoom up closely, you can see it's taking effect. So if I turn the factor all the way up to 1, now you can see it's just adding those darkest values. Now I want to take the factor and I just want to turn this to like a 0.7. So it is adding those dark values, but it is a little bit faded. All right, so all of these 4 nodes is creating the planet's surface. So I'm going to press B for the box select, and I'm just going to box select all these nodes, and then I can press Control J. Control J is going to add the frame here, and I can just kind of push these together. So I'm actually going to bring the noise texture back, and then I'm going to stick these up here just to compact this together a little bit more. And then if I click on the frame, I can press F2 to rename this, and I'm going to call this planet surface. All right, so that is the planet surface. Now I also want to create a texture for some mountain ranges on the planet. So I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the Voronoi texture, and let's add the Voronoi texture right down here. And then I want to put the object into the vector of the Voronoi, and then I can also Control Shift and select the Voronoi to preview it. Now right here on this bottom value, I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to change this instead to the Minkowski, if that's how you pronounce it. And when I changed that, you can kind of see that it added like these little stars, but I want these to look like mountain ranges, and so I'm going to use these lines here from the stars to look like mountain ranges. Now right now they are very flat and straight, and so I want to distort the Voronoi texture to make it look random and organic and natural. So to do this, I can press Shift A. Let's go here to the search, and I'm going to search for a noise texture, and let's stick the noise texture right in here between the texture coordinate and the Voronoi. And so this way the noise texture is distorting the placement of the Voronoi. And so now all the little lines from the Voronoi have turned into squiggles. Now I want to add more detail, so let's turn the detail all the way up to the max, which is 15, and then let's also turn the scale down, so I'm going to turn this down to like a 2. And then I do want to add a little bit of distortion, so I'll turn the distortion value to a 0.1. So now you can see that this is starting to look kind of like little mountain ranges. And then right here on the Voronoi, let's also turn the scale down to like a 1 so that they are much bigger. And then I can just leave these 2 values at their default. Now you can't actually see them very well, they are very gray, and so I want to be able to see those mountains better. So to do this, let's press Shift A. I'm going to go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the math node, and we're going to stick the math node right here after the Voronoi. Now if I click here on the add, I can change this to divide. So it's right here under functions, you can click on divide. So the distance is going to go into the first value, and I can now turn the second value up, and that is going to make it darker, and so you can see the mountain ranges better. And I'm going to turn this value here to a 9.8. I think a 9.8 is pretty good. Now I want the mountain ranges to be a bit more sharp, and I don't want them to be all over the place. I just want them to be in some places here and there where those dark lines are. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go here to the search, and I'm going to search for a color ramp, and we're going to drop the color ramp right here after the divide. So I can then click and drag, and I can just bring these over to kind of squish these together and kind of compact them a little bit better. Maybe bring this back. All right, so I can now play around with these color ramp values, and that's going to make it more contrasty. So I'm going to drag this out, and I'm going to bring out this tab and kind of bring it to here. And then I can also click on the white tab, and I can drag it out over here. And you can see as I drag it closer and closer, you can see now the mountain ranges are much sharper, but then there is more white areas in between the mountain ranges. And then I also want to hold down the Control key and click right here, and this is going to add another white tab, and then I want to drag this white tab over to the other side. So we're going to have a white tab, then a black tab, and then another white tab. And I want to drag these pretty close to each other because I only want the mountain ranges to be some spots here and there. So wherever the dark values are, that is where the mountain ranges are going to be. And there we have it. So those are all the mountains. So I'm just going to click and drag and just box select all these nodes here. And then I can press Control J. That's going to add a frame, and I can just click on the frame, and to add a label to the frame, I can press F2, and let's just call this Planet Mountains. So now we have the planet mountains and the planet surface. And I want to combine both of these together. So I'm going to select the darken, hold down the Shift key, and select the color ramp. I can now press Control 0, and that is going to again add the mix RGB, and let's just open this up, bring it over here, and it's going to join these both together. and I want the darken to be going into color 1 and then the color ramp to be going into color 2. Now if I just have this set to mix, it's just going to evenly blend between the two values, but I want to instead click on the mix here and I'm going to change this to darken. So now we can just add the dark values and then I can turn the factor all the way up to 1. So basically what this is doing is it's just adding the mountain ranges. So now the mountain ranges are on top of the planet surface. And then I'm going to zoom out here and I want to box select all of these nodes here and I'm going to bring them down so we have more space, because I do need quite a bit of space here before the principled shader, because I'm going to plug up these values to the base color and the normal and roughness. So let's first start with the base color. So for the base color, I actually just want to use the darken here from the planet surface. So I'm going to plot a wire here from the color and I'm going to stick this into the base color of the principled shader. And then I can control shift and select the principled shader to preview it. Now the values are just white and black right now, so I want to control the colors better. So let's press Shift A. I'm going to go here to the search and I'm going to search for the color ramp, and let's stick the color ramp right here in this wire. And then I can change these colors here and that's going to change the planet's base color. So I'm first going to drag out this black tab and I'm going to drag it out to about here. And I'm going to keep this color fully black. And then I'm going to click on this tab here and I'm going to drag this over a bit so it's more contrasty. And then this color right here, I want to make this kind of a tannish orangey color. But I do also want this to be a bit more brown, so kind of like a light brown. And if you'd like to use the same exact hex value, I'm going to be using a hex value of 9E7461. And then I'm also going to hold down the control key and click right here, and that's going to add another tab. And then I'm going to click on this color here in the middle, and I'm going to make this one more red. So this one is going to be a brownish reddish color. And to use the same value that I'm using, you can go to the hex and you can punch in 6C3119. So that is the colors that I'll be using. So we now have a really cool texture there for the planet. Now I also want to control the roughness because I want some parts to be a little bit more rough and other parts to be a little bit more shiny. So I'm going to take the color here from this darken from the planet surface and I'm going to pull out a wire and stick this into the roughness value of the principled shader. Now I want to be able to control the roughness better, so I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go here to the search and I'm going to add another color ramp and let's stick this here right before the roughness. Now this is a lava planet, so where the dirt and rock are, I want that to be pretty rough and dry. So I'm going to click on this black tab here and I'm going to click on the color and I can turn this up. And you can see as I turn it up, it's going to be more and more rough, because if the values are fully white, it's going to be very rough. But then if the colors are very black, it's going to be very shiny. And if you want to use the same gray color that I'm using, you can go over here to the hex value and you can punch in 8C, 8C, 8C. And then this white tab, I'm just going to leave this at fully white and I'll just leave it over here on the right side. Now you might be wondering when we're actually going to add in those lava pools. So let's add in those lakes of lava. So I'm going to use this darken here, and this is the combined planet surface and planet mountains. So I'm going to pull out a wire here from the color and I'm going to plug this into the emission value because this lava is glowing and it is emitting light. Now right now it's pretty much making the entire planet lava, and so we'll fix that in a moment. But first I want to create the lava colors. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go here to the search and I'm going to search for a color ramp, and we're going to stick this right here before the emission. So I can change these colors and that's going to change the lava colors. So on this black tab here, I'm going to make this a very bright color and then I'm going to make it an orange color. And the hex value for this orange color is going to be FF8400. And then this white tab, I'm going to click on this one and I'm going to make this one a very bright red color. And the hex value for the red color is going to be FF1000. So these are going to be the colors for the lava. Now the entire planet is lava, and instead of the entire planet being lava, I just want some little lava pools and lava lakes here and there around the planet. So what I can do is I can put a value into the emission strength, because right now we just have this emission value and this is going to make the entire planet emission, or if I turn the emission value to 0, then none of the planet is going to be the emission. So I want to plug a value here into the emission strength. So to do this, I can take the color here and I can put this into the emission strength. Now I want to have more control over this, so let's press Shift A. I'm going to go here to the search, and again I'm going to search for another color ramp. And then we're going to drop the color ramp right here in this wire going into the emission strength. And I can just drag it right down here. And I can also bring the principled shader forward a bit if I need to. So I can now drag these values, and you can see that's going to change where the lava is. So I want to click on the black tab, and I'm going to drag this way over so that just a few spots here and there have the lava. So I'm going to drag this black tab to about here. And now you can see that there's just some little lava pools here and there. Now the lava pools are very dark, they aren't very bright, and I want them to be much more bright. So to do this, I can press Shift A. Let's go here to the search, and I'm going to search for a math node. We're going to stick the math node after the color ramp. So I want to multiply the values. So I'm going to click on the add here, and I'm going to change this to multiply, and the multiply is under the functions. So the color can go into the first value, and then we can take the second value and we can turn this up, and that is going to multiply the color values, and so that is going to make the lava much brighter. And I'm going to turn the value to like a 30. So now that this is turned up to 30, it's very bright, and so you can see around the edges of the lava pools, it's more red and more orange, and then in the center of the lava pools, it is more yellow. And that is really starting to look more like a lava planet. So this is looking pretty cool, but the planet is very smooth. Especially if I zoom in closely, you can see the entire planet is very smooth. So I want to add some values into the normal to give the planet some bump. So first we're going to make the lava pools look like they are going into the mesh. So to do this, I can take the color here from this color ramp, and I'm going to put this into the normal. Now this isn't really working right now, and that is because we need to convert the color data into normal data so the principled shader can actually use it. So let's press Shift A. I'm going to go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the bump node, and we're going to stick the bump node right here between the color ramp and the normal. And then to actually convert this to normal data, I want to put the color here from the color ramp into the height value. So now you can see that where the lava is, it is popping out. But instead of it popping out, I want it to look like it's going back in. So I'm going to click on the invert button. And now it looks like those lava pools are dipping down a bit. Now I also want the mountain ranges to look like they are popping out of the mesh. So to do this, I'm going to click on the bump, and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it, and I'm going to stick the bump node right here. And then I want to put the normal into the normal of this bump. So we can now put another value into the height value of this new bump. So I'm going to take this color ramp value from the planet mountains, and I'm going to put the color into the height value. So now you can see that those mountains are popping out a lot. And I do want to leave the inverted turned on, because if the invert is turned off, it actually looks like the mountains are going back in, but I'm going to click on the invert so the mountains are popping out. Now those mountains are way too strong, so I'm going to turn the strength value way down to just like a 0.3. So there is still a big problem. There are many spots on the planet where it is very smooth. And so I want to add a bunch of noise all over the planet's surface. So I'm going to select the bump, and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it, and let's stick it down here. And then the normal can go into the normal. So we now have this extra height value that we can add data into. So I'm going to take this darken here from the planet surface. I'm going to pull out a wire, and I'm going to stick this way down here into the height value of this last bump. And then I don't need the invert, so I can just turn that off. And then that is pretty strong, so I'm just going to turn the strength value to like a 0.2. So I'm going to zoom out here, and then I'm going to box select all of these nodes here. So I want to box select the color ramps. I also want to box select the bump nodes, and then also this multiply here and the principled shader. So all of these nodes here. I can now press Ctrl J. That's going to join these all together into a frame. And then with the frame selected, I can press F2, and let's just rename this to planet, because these are all the planet nodes. So there we have it. There is the procedural material. So to preview the atmosphere, I need to Control Shift and select the mix shader. And there we go. There is the procedural planet. And then I can also click on the sun, and I can press G to grab, and I can move this around. And you can see as I move the sun around, the atmosphere is going to adapt. Now to make this really look like a planet, I'm going to be adding a procedural star background, and then we're also going to do a little bit of compositing after we render this to get some glow around the atmosphere. So I'm going to hold down the Z button and move my mouse back to the solid view, and I'm going to make this a bit bigger. And then I'm going to press Alt H, and Alt H is going to unhide the plane that we hid that was in the background. So just select the plane, and then I can click on new here to create a new material, and I can just rename this material to stars. All right, and then I'm going to click on the principled shader, and I'm going to press X to delete it because I don't want to use the principled shader. I'm instead going to press Shift A, and I'm going to go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the emission. Let's put this down here, and then I can plug the emission into the surface. And then I'm going to hold down the Z button and move my mouse up into the rendered view so I can preview the background. So the emission is going to actually emit light, and that works well for the stars because the stars are bright. So to make the star texture, I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the Voronoi texture, and let's drop this here. And then with the Voronoi texture selected, I can press Control T. That's going to add the texture coordinate and mapping, but then I don't need the mapping, so I can select the mapping, and let's press X to delete it. And then I can take the object here from the texture coordinate, and let's put that into the vector. And then I also want to Control Shift and select the Voronoi texture to preview it. Now on the scale here, I'm going to turn this to like a 400 on the Voronoi texture. So now if I zoom in there, you can see there's lots of little stars. Now I want to flip the colors because right now you can see the stars are actually black. So let's press Shift A. I'm going to go here to the search, and I'm going to search for a color ramp node. Let's click on the color ramp, and I can just stick it right here after the distance from the Voronoi. And then to flip the colors, I can click right here on this arrow, and I can click on Flip Color Ramp. So now you can see the stars look very large. So to make the stars smaller, I can click on the black tab, and I'm going to drag the black tab much closer, and now you can see we have a bunch of little stars. And I'm going to make this very small. So I now want to take the color from the color ramp, and I'm going to put that into the color of the emission, and then I can Control Shift and click on the emission shader. And then I do want the stars to be a lot brighter, so let's turn the strength value to like a 30. And now the stars are much brighter, and you can see them a lot better. So that is it. That is the procedural stars texture. So I'm now going to give this a final render, and then we will do a little bit of compositing. So to render the image, you can click on render, and then you can click on render image. All right, so the render finished. So now let's just do some compositing to make this look really nice. So I'm going to click right up here to go to the compositing tab, and then make sure you click on the use nodes so that you can actually use the compositing nodes. And then also make sure you click on the backdrop button so you can actually preview the compositing. And then also you can Control Shift and select the render layers, and that is using the Node Wrangler add-on, and it's going to add the viewer node. And so this way you'll actually be able to preview the backdrop in the background. And then I want to add all of the compositing nodes to one single wire. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to right click and drag, and I'm going to drag a line over both of the wires and then let go. This is going to add a reroute. So now I can just plug all the compositing nodes up to the single wire. So the first thing that I want to do is press Shift A, go here to the search, and I want to search for the denoise node, and we're going to use the denoise node just to denoise the image and smooth it out and make it look much better. So let's put the denoise node right in here in the wire. And then I'm going to click on the accurate, and I can just change this to fast so it goes faster. Now I also want to play around with the colors a little bit. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go here to the search, and I'm going to search for RGB curves, and let's click on the RGB curves, and I can drop it right here after the denoise. Now I want to click right here to add a little dot, and I'm going to bring this dot up a bit, and that is going to make things a bit brighter and more contrasty. And then I can click right here to add another dot, and I'm going to bring this dot down a little bit. It's going to do some nice color correction, and it's going to make everything a bit more sharp and make it more contrasty. So I do really like how that looks. And the last thing that I'm going to do to make this really look nice is I'm going to add the glare node. So let's press Shift A. I'm going to go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the glare node, and we're going to stick the glare node right here after the RGB curves. And then I can click on the streaks, and I'm going to instead change this to the fog glow. And then I want the size to be very big, so let's turn the size up to the max, which is 9. And then I can just leave this set to medium. I think medium looks really good. So it finished compositing, but the glare node isn't really doing anything. And why this is happening is because it doesn't really detect anything which is super bright, just because these lights here aren't actually super bright. But to change this, I can just change the threshold on the glare. So I'm going to turn the threshold down to a 0.1. And by making the threshold smaller, it is going to add glare to more of the lights, even if the lights aren't quite as bright. So I think point 1 looks pretty good, and now you can see the lava is glowing and the atmosphere has that really nice glow there. So there is the finished image. So now to save this final image, I can press the F11 key, or you can also click right up here and you can go to the image editor. And then click right here on the drop down and make sure you select the viewer node, because the viewer node is going to preview the final compositing. So to save this image, I can click on image and click on save as. So there we have it. There is the procedural lava planet. So thank you so much for watching this tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you'd like to help support me and this channel, as well as purchase the procedural material, then you can get that over on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. I will have the links in the description. And if you'd like to purchase more of my materials, you can also check out my Blender procedural material packs. And if you'd like to learn how to create any of my procedural materials, you can also check out my Blender procedural material tutorial playlist here on YouTube. And also, if you'd like to learn how to create a completely procedural Earth, then I have a tutorial which I created a little while back on how to create a completely procedural Earth. So I will have the links in the description to that. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you found it helpful, and thank you for watching.